Reflections on the Good News of Jesus Christ for the first Sunday of Lent from the Gospel according to Matthew. At that time, Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert to be tempted by the devil. He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was hungry. The tempter approached and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command that these stones become loaves of bread." Jesus said in reply, "It is written, 'One does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes forth from the mouth of God.'" Then the devil took him to the holy city and made him stand on the parapet of the temple and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. For it is written, 'He will command his angels concerning you, and with their hands they will support you, lest you dash your foot against a stone.'" Jesus answered him, "Again it is written, 'You shall not put the Lord your God to the test.'" Then the devil took him up to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in their magnificence. And he said to him, "All these I shall give to you, if you will prostrate yourself and worship me." At this, Jesus said to him, "Get away, Satan. It is written, 'The Lord your God shall you worship, and him alone shall you serve.'" Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and ministered to him. The good news of the Lord. If you've ever spent time in the desert, you may recognize this traveler's description of the sense of the sacred he experienced in the deserts of the American Southwest. The desert is a vast and lonely landscape, with great distances separating the few locations that provide any protection and comfort. Intensified by unbroken vistas of land and sky, perspective is distorted. Roads are few, and those are no more than dirt trails, rutted and strewn with rocks, impassably muddy after a rain, or packed as concrete by the bleaching sun. Even the best prepared traveler may meet the unexpected, the freak storm, the slip or fall off a trail, the sudden strike of the surprised rattlesnake. In the final analysis, only the fool thinks he can rely on his strength and skill alone. In short, the desert escapes my control. For this reason, my mind is drawn quietly, patiently, naturally toward someone outside myself on whom I can lean. Whatever and whoever holds all of this firm but fragile being in existence. The desert escapes my control. I've known many people who, like Jesus, were thrown into the desert in one way or another, including myself. Our stories are similar, each with its own unique details, yet all describing what appears to be a common, perhaps universal human experience. Something happens to set off a chain reaction of feelings of confusion, frustration, perhaps anger, certainly pain, often abandonment, and always loss of control. This something might be moving to a new place, starting in a new school, beginning in a new job, or getting laid off from an old one. And in each case, leaving behind the known and familiar. It might be the experience of sickness, an unexpected pregnancy, the loss of a friend, the end of a relationship, the death of a loved one. Or it might be something less traumatic, but no less genuine, a lingering feeling of malaise or unease over one's state in life, living with a situation that does not make sense, struggling with a problem that seems to have no solution. The experience may come in a great many ways, but come it does, and to a great many people. Not only is the experience a common one, it is also an ancient one in human history. The Bible tells several such stories, and the image used to describe those experiences is the image of being thrown into the desert. In the southwest United States, there is also a vast expanse of desert. It deserves the greatest respect, for much of it is a wild, unpredictable, unsettled land, a wilderness, even in this 21st century. So much more must the deserts of the Middle East have appeared to the inspired writers of long ago. For them, the desert had an additional symbolic meaning. The desert was God's country, precisely because it was land they could not predict or control. So it became a sign of God's mystery and God's mercy. To be thrown into the desert, whether literally or metaphorically, means to be uprooted from what is known, secure, ordered, and under control, into a state where things are unknown, insecure, disordered, out of control. And the cry goes up, "What happened? Why? And now what do I do?" The desert is the state in which, stripped of all that normally nourishes and supports us, we are exposed, body and soul, to chaos, raw fear, temptations, and demons of every kind. But precisely because we are so stripped of everything we normally rely on, the desert experience is also a privileged moment of grace. Why? Because all the defense mechanisms, support systems, and distractions that we normally surround ourselves with so as to keep chaos and fear at bay work at the same time to keep God at bay. What we use to buoy us wards off chaos and grace, demons and the divine alike. But when we are helpless, like it or not, we are cracked open. That is why the desert is both the place of chaos and the place of God's closeness, just as Jesus discovered. As one writer has observed, being thrown into the desert is an experience which may cause us to panic. We who pride ourselves on our sense of control and self-reliance. But when your God is self-reliance, and you let yourself down, there is nowhere else to turn. And this is the first lesson of the desert. By feeling uneasy and unsure, by fearing that you are out of your depth and therefore might falter, by feeling small and alone, you begin, slowly, reluctantly, maybe even for the first time in your life, you begin to consider turning somewhere else. You might even consider turning to God. Turning to God would be an appropriate response, because just as happened when the Spirit drove Jesus into the desert, when, not if, it happens to you, know that God is up to something in your life. Know too that in the desert you will wrestle with your own demons, but you will also be strengthened by God's presence, just as Jesus was. Jesus embarks on his wilderness retreat as a time for discerning and understanding his mission as the Messiah. These 40 days are marked by intense prayer and fasting, not out of a sense of penance, but to focus totally on God, and God's will for him. The three temptations all confront Jesus with very human choices. So human, in fact, that they are temptations for us too. First, command this stone to become bread. Will Jesus use his power for his own gratification and acclaim, or to accomplish the will of God? How do I use my power? Second, all this will be yours if you worship me. Will Jesus compromise the values of God to accommodate the values of the world? How am I responding to the many ways I am tempted to worship something other than God, such as money, power, prestige, success? And third, throw yourself down from here. Will Jesus use God's power to amaze people so that they will follow him? Or will he follow God's plan, as difficult as it may be? Do I have a plan that I think is better than God's, if God would only listen to me? It is a long, lonely, and difficult time for Jesus, coming to terms with the life that lay before him, as a desert experience can be for any one of us. In fact, anyone who lives with passion, anyone who becomes deeply committed to the cause of Jesus, will be tempted in the same ways he was. With that in mind, realize that the same Spirit that led Jesus into the desert now leads us into this 40-day wilderness experience of Lent. The Spirit prompts us to ask ourselves the same kind of questions, to understand more clearly who we are and who we are becoming, to discern what God calls each of us to be. Lent calls us to the silent wilderness within us where God speaks words of hope and encouragement. The quiet space where we clear our heads to realize what is right and good. Our Christian tradition gives us three principal ways for making this Lenten journey: fasting, almsgiving, and prayer. A few suggestions for how you might put these into practice. Fast from anything that is spiritually or physically unhealthy. That may be some particular food or drink, or it may be some activity, or it may be anything in your life that is excessive. If you can, give alms of money or material goods to someone whose needs are greater than yours. But also, consider giving alms of your time, your talent, or your energy to someone else, or to a cause or organization that needs whatever you can give. And as for prayer, speak, yes, but above all, listen. To pray is to be loved by God, and to speak to God in confidence. But then allow God to speak to you. In prayer, all masks must be removed, because God can come to you only when you are willing to be known as you are. One time, you may be happy. The next time, you may be sad or bored. It is possible that you are angry with some person or with God. Yes, you may also express anger in your prayer. But again, God can come to you only when you are willing to be known as you truly are. When you and I were baptized, we, or someone speaking for us, promised to reject Satan, the father of sin and prince of darkness. How do you name the demon in your life now? You probably do not call it Satan or Prince of Darkness. Perhaps the demon in your life is named consumerism, militarism, alcoholism or drug abuse, egotism, escapism, materialism or narcissism, nationalism, racism or sexism, anger, jealousy, envy, pride. From which of these, or any number of other demons, do you need to be freed? Which of these sins do you need to reject, as the rite of baptism states, so as to live in the freedom of God's children? It is a critically important question to ask during the season of Lent, because a central purpose of Lent is to prepare us to celebrate Easter, resurrection, new life, not just for Jesus, but for us too. And on Easter, you and I are going to be asked that same question as we renew our baptismal promises. How will we answer this year? How are we rejecting Satan, the Prince of Darkness, at this point in our lives? May God lead us this Lent into the desert of our hearts. May these days be a time of discernment and discovery, of resolution and conversion for each of us. May the Word of God be our bread during this wilderness journey. May God's light illuminate the many turns of the road we walk. May God's grace and wisdom minister to us in our deserts of sadness and despair. May this be a season of repentance and living the good news for all of us. May this Lent teach us what it truly means to be a faithful son or daughter of God as Jesus was, and then help us to do it. Thanks for listening today. Please share this with someone else if you know somebody who you think would like to listen to it. And if you'd like to subscribe and receive these gospel reflections every weekend, you may do so by going to our website, which is www.justanother.disciple.com. Once again, www.justanother.disciple.com. Thanks for listening.